Well, it's that time again, that time when we walk into the virtual bar, calculators in hand, to discuss what everyone is discussing in bars these days, economics. Today I'm joined by Pastor Greg and Ken, and I'm your host, Christopher Antone, and this is Three Pastors Walk Into a Bar. You think that's true? You think everybody in bars is talking about economics?
Yeah, especially up here in North Idaho.
Especially with the price of beer.
Well, when it comes time to pay the tab, for sure.
Yeah. When it comes to the price of beer. Yeah.
I used to be able to sit here for 4 hours. I can't do it no more.
So last year, we warned about the increasing our national debt to pay for the Biden administration's massive social and infrastructure spending plans, and as well as funding the military aid to Ukraine. You guys might remember that episode. Mm-hmm. Both of those issues were threatening to damage our economic stability and growth, but not only for us, but for generations to come. Like, not for my kids, but my kids' 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 kids, right?
And didn't take that long, did it?
So here we are in the middle of, inflation and a lot of different weird things that are going on in economics. And so we're a little out of our depth here. So we asked Jonathan Barth, who's the assistant professor of history at Arizona State University, to join us. He's also the associate lead of the Political History and Leadership Program, the School of Historical, Philosophical, and Religious Studies. That is a massive name. Say that 3 times real fast. He specializes in the history of money and banking with interests in politics and culture, theology, and the history of ideas. He has a YouTube channel where you can see him speak on a variety of topics, and he recently published his first book. And you're gonna read this title. You're gonna hear this title, and you're gonna be like, "Man, open up my Amazon account."
Yeah. Get me that.
It's called "Prepare Yourselves, Calm Yourselves: The Currency of Empire, Money and Power in 17th Century English America."
Wow, is that it? Number 1 yet?
How did I do, Jonathan?
A few hundred copies.
Well, good.
Hey, it's available for free online, though.
Really?
Cornell released it open access, so you can download the PDF for free.
We were discussing whether or not it costs $300 and each of your students had to have a copy.
Yeah, you would think that wouldn't be a bad move. The hard copy, the hard copy was $20, so I was actually pretty happy with that.
Oh, well, that's not bad at all. Yeah, that's not a school textbook at all. It's not even close. So last year we spoke with Jonathan in May as inflation started to become a serious issue as a result of Biden's expensive domestic and foreign policies, including combating climate change and responding to the COVID-19 pandemic. And the war in Ukraine had just begun, and the U.S. had not yet sent significant aid to Ukraine, but since then the U.S. has given Ukraine over $7.6 billion. 76 billion. Sorry, I don't have my reading glasses on. I just have my regular glasses on, so I can't. It's a little bit blurry. So 76 billion in aid. For perspective, that is almost twice as much in terms of GOP as we have sent to Israel since 1979.
When I read that, I was like, "Nah, that's not right. That can't be right."
That's bonkers.
It's bonkers. Yeah.
Wow.
That's a perspective to think about.
Yes, very much so.
Yeah. So,
and didn't Biden recently say, "Oh yeah, America is behind Israel all the way"?
Oh yeah.
Well, I mean, I don't.
To a degree.
Yeah.
Maybe.
I don't know.
Sort of.
So where are we at with inflation? So we'll give you our stuff, and then we'll ask Jonathan to chime in what he thinks about this stuff. So, according to the House Ways and Means Committee, in April of this year, inflation has increased 14.9% since President Biden took office. Real wages have decreased 3.5%, which is weird to me because, I mean, didn't we hike minimum wage up to this exorbitant amount federally? I mean, wasn't that a thing? Or
yeah.
I mean, I don't know for sure. So
where did that stat come from?
Go ahead, John.
The federal minimum wage has stayed the same, but wages on average have increased. But that shows how much inflation there's been. Notwithstanding the wage increase, there's still a decline in real wages because of inflation.
Okay, so it's not that people's wages are lower; it's that their wages are lower in comparison to the rate of inflation.
Okay,
I got you.
Nominal wages are up, but real wages are down.
Yeah, so living wages basically are down because of inflation. So the average mortgage payment is 15% higher than 1 year ago. We know that to be true because our real estate market here is bonkers, man.
Crazy.
It is crazy. Yeah,
That's a bubble.
It's gonna pop at some point, and I am so glad that I bought 14 years ago.
I'm so glad I bought 43 years ago.
Yeah, because I think a lot of these people who are spending all this money on these, but a lot of these people are spending cash. They're coming up from California with their, retirements and sold their homes up there, and they're okay losing some money to get out of California. Isn't that a weird thought?
Well, that's what happened in the Phoenix market. My wife and I, we were looking for a new home 2 years ago. Thankfully, back when the mortgage rate was, we got under 3%. Wow. Now, good luck getting too much less than 7%. But California buyers were coming in and paying cash, and that's caused housing prices in Phoenix to just absolutely go through the roof.
Exactly what happened here.
Yeah, that's exactly what happened here. To 11.
And then the other interesting thing about the housing market, if I may, if you purchased a home in the last 10, 15 years at these low rates, you're not selling your home
no.
unless you absolutely have to.
Yeah.
They've called these the golden handcuffs, because if you locked in at that low rate, why would you sell your home? So there's actually, ironically, a shortage of homes on the market for upcoming buyers, even though the 30-year rate is so high, because so few people who locked in at lower rates are wanting to sell.
Yeah.
You can't drive around Coeur d'Alene area right now without seeing new housing tracks going in.
Yeah.
Everywhere.
Yep.
And houses don't stay on the market but 3 weeks at the most, 3 or 4. It's crazy, and just having a real estate agent tell you what your house is worth now. I'm
a millionaire.
I have entertained thoughts of just selling and moving down to, the Dominican Republic or something, just
living in a box,
getting a little house with a hammock on a beach or something somewhere, listening to Jimmy Buffett all day long. That wouldn't be
there are a lot of expats in places like Uruguay and Ecuador, because your dollar will go a long way down there.
Yeah,
that would be the goal for sure.
Now you got to learn another language.
Yeah, they got Duolingo. I can pick it up pretty quick.
Money talks.
Yeah.
Doesn't everybody speak English?
Yeah, right. Everybody does, for sure. Interest rates in the last year have increased more than in previous 15 years combined. So that interest rate hike is probably an attempt by the government to or by the Reserve to stem inflation, probably, right?
Yeah, the interest rate's at the highest level in 22 years. So, that and that's in response to the inflation.
Yeah,
and it's been very rapid. The acceleration, it went from 0 to 5.5%.
Yeah. Now, I was watching a feed that I follow on Facebook every once in a while, and there was a person that had mentioned our high inflation, and on this particular there are some President Biden devotees, quite a few of them. And they made an argument that it's unfair to compare inflation or put inflation on the shoulders of Joe Biden, because we currently have a global inflation, and America is coming out of that inflation faster than any other country. Is that true, Jonathan? Do you know?
Inflation is a problem worldwide right now. Okay. there's an element of truth to, pinning everything on Biden the man. I'm not sure that Biden really knows of anything that's going on in his own administration right now.
That's probably a true statement. Yeah.
And saying this as someone, I mean, look, the spending under Biden has just been completely out of control. Okay. But we have to remind ourselves that it's the Federal Reserve that enables this federal spending, this massive spending. The Federal Reserve is what creates our currency,
right?
And is in charge of the entire credit and banking system. And so while, I'm certainly no fan of the current administration and their economic policies, I think it's very wrongheaded. I don't like what they've done in the energy sector. I think has been very damaging. Certainly the spending is just completely out of control, but the Federal Reserve enables this drunkard activity.
Yeah.
The analogy, I think I used this analogy last time where I was on a show, if you have an alcoholic, okay, yeah, the alcoholic needs to quit drinking, but what do you need to rein in the alcoholic, but what about the person providing the alcohol? Who's bringing the punch bowl to the party? And in this case, the Federal Reserve is providing the spiked punch, and then the federal government's getting drunk.
Yeah.
Okay. So, if the Federal Reserve wouldn't enable all of this spending through massive QE, I mean, and this really dates all the way back to COVID.
Yeah.
Okay. Our current situation, the government's response to COVID was completely out of proportion to the reality of what we're facing. They obviously a country went completely hysterical. I think a lot of that was media driven.
Mm-hmm.
I think there was also political reason.
Yeah.
Politicians on both sides of the aisle, like to keep the people, they like control, keep the people in fear. People are very, very fearful. And then in spring of 2020, the national debt went through the roof. I mean, we're already, so in the beginning of 2020, national debt was $23 trillion. Today it's $33 trillion. Okay. That's a 42% increase since the COVID outbreak. That didn't need to happen. All right. But the Federal Reserve financed that debt through massive QE. QE is quantitative easing, where the Federal Reserve creates currency and credit out of thin air. The money supply increased by 45%.
What
in
is
the year after COVID?
Jonathan, what does the term QE stand for?
Quantitative easing.
Okay.
And so what that is, it's a very fancy term that basically means creating money and credit out of thin air, out of nothing. And so when the outbreak happened and everything was shut down because of Lord Fauci and all the rest. I see Klaus Schwab is joining us. You didn't tell me, Schwab.
Yeah.
You didn't tell me. Yeah.
Well, we don't.
Are you intimidated?
We don't advertise it,
Well, he's watching everyone, know.
You will own nothing and you will like it. Yeah.
So, but Powell, okay, so like Powell's is getting a lot of.
Jonathan, hold on. I should say that for those of you guys, some of you guys, everybody's listening to this. You can't hear, you can't see what's going on, but just over Ken's shoulder is a giant bust of Klaus Schwab that we've had as a remnant from Liberty Rumble. We used to do the Liberty Rumble podcast. And he has been a component of our podcast room for nigh on a year now. So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. We've gotten used to him staring at us.
That's the obscure reference there. Those
we for those out in Radio Land, this is a Zoom meeting with Jonathan.
Yeah.
So we're looking at each other, and he's looking at us and wondering.
Well,
what
he's
the
really
heck
just
is
looking.
going
He's
on.
really just looking at Klaus, going, "Why is Klaus standing there glaring at me?"
Hey, Ken, do you? There you go.
Well, the World Economic Forum has all of our best interests at heart. They really want what's best for everybody.
You're funny.
So this
is
like
the first, elites throughout history. That's never been the case for elites throughout all of history, except this one generation that we're currently living in. That's the exception. And,
yeah, we're very lucky to have the wonderful group of elites that we have in this generation, because they're different than all the other elites that have ever existed.
Than the other elites.
Yep.
So this seems like a good place to, Jonathan, if you can, maybe explain to us what modern monetary theory is, because it seems like that's what we're operating under right now. And is that dangerous? Because, Janet Yellen, Secretary of the Treasury, has said she supports MMT. But that seems to explain what's going on here, and I don't think a lot of people understand it.
Well, modern monetary theory is a misnomer. It's not modern. It was tried many times in a couple centuries back and failed every time. It's tried in the 20th century, failed. Modern monetary theory is basically you finance the government not through taxes in the short term or through borrowing, but you just print the money.
Isn't that also known as Keynesian economics?
It's a little different than that. Keynesian economics, does include a lot of inflation, obviously. But Keynesianism is a lot more sophisticated than that. I'm not a Keynesian. I have deep scruples with Keynesianism, but I want to be fair. That Keynesianism makes theoretically, you could make the argument for Keynesianism. Modern monetary theory is the government needs to spend money, just print it. Okay. Wow. And then if inflation gets out of control, which okay. If prices start to go up, then what you do is you withdraw the currency from circulation through taxing the public. Okay. So you print a bunch of money. If prices start to get out of whack, well, you just call it back in through taxes. This was done in the 18th century. It was done during the French Revolution. It was done during the various parts in the 19th century, including during the Civil War in this country. It was done in the Weimar Republic in Germany. Okay. And it doesn't work. You can't create wealth out of nothing.
It seems to me, Jonathan, that it's just another kind of methodology for redistributing the wealth.
It can certainly, it has a potential of throwing the entire economy out of whack, and it can lead to very, very high taxation. And not just on the rich. A lot of times the left will talk about, we need to tax the rich more. Under modern monetary theory, they would have to tax you and I and the public and the lower middle class. They would have to tax them too. It would, thankfully, I think our experience in the last couple of years has gone a long way in debunking modern monetary theory, because that in some ways is what happened during COVID. I mean, remember all those checks that we got in the mail in 2020 and 2021? Where did that money come from?
They printed it.
It came, it was just made up. It was monopoly money. And then on the other side of that, inflation. So these people who are like, gee, why do we have inflation? Well, I mean, it's not rocket science. It's quite clear. If you look at the stats and the data, the money supply increased. You do that, the value of your currency is going to fall.
Who do you think is orchestrating that? Where's that coming from?
I mean, you do have, look, we say we have a democracy, in reality, our politicians in the Senate, the Congress, certainly are in the executive department, not just the president, but all the various departments of you look at what happened with the FDA and the CDC, the corruption there, the influence of big pharma in their decisions. I mean, a large portion of our government has been captured by corporate interest, by elite financial interests. And there is a global element. I mean, we were joking about Klaus Schwab earlier, but I mean, the World Economic Forum is a very powerful organization and does exert tremendous influence over domestic policy. And that's a real problem. It's a threat to democracy, actually, true democracy. Of course, we live in a democratic republic.
Right.
We have, the way that founders designed our government was that
Thank you for saying that, Jonathan. I appreciate that.
Yeah.
You never hear people say that anymore.
No, but it's very important. You don't want the 51% to tyrannize the 49%,
right,
in the name of democracy. The minority rights, and by minority I mean just any group or interest that represents a minority of the population. I would say Christians fall under that category. Their rights need to be protected regardless of what the majority of people think.
Right.
And our Constitution has those safeguards. But as it currently stands, the United States more and more has become an oligarchy of, controlled. I mean, look at, you see in the U.S. Senate, I don't know if you saw the photo of Dianne Feinstein in the wheelchair in the Senate, or what happened to Mitch McConnell, last week.
Yeah.
And look, I mean, my heart goes out to them. They're in their old age, but why are they still there? We live in our federal government is less and less representative of the people, and that's a problem.
Yeah. Which I think, we were having a conversation earlier about, how long will it be before the United States fractures? And, I don't see the likelihood of the United States remaining a union like it is for more than a century at the very most, unless something drastic changes, because it's unsustainable. The what we're doing now is not sustainable.
Yeah, it's not. And actually, I think you're being generous by giving a century.
Yeah, I was trying to be optimistic. Yeah,
democratic.
Well,
I want to dip back into my question about the MMT, and where's the problem? You alluded a little bit to some of that's international. World Economic Forum, the WHO, and some of those places there. How do we combat this? Can we combat this?
There's not a lot that we can do as individuals. Okay. I think we need to strengthen local communities. Okay. So on a personal level, what you can do. All right. Look, I mean, I think the average size of a congressman's constituency is like 500,000 people. Okay. Good luck, influencing your federal congressman unless you have a lot of money. Okay. Right. That goes back to the problem with everything. Okay. So what can you do? Strengthen your local community. Americans need to start going back to church. I mean, church attendance has been down. Church is going beyond, I mean, we're all Christians here. So theologically, we agree the Bible commands us to go to church. But just from a sociological angle, church is a social institution that provides community, where people can help each other, where people, right now, loneliness is a really big problem in the United States. People are very lonely.
With COVID.
Why? Yeah. And why? I mean, they're not connected. They're not embedded in anything. And so that's really important. And I think if we strengthen our local communities, go to city council meetings, there was a lot, we saw the impact of parents going to school board meetings. Why did that have such a huge impact? Because that's local community. You have a larger voice locally than you do federally, and on the state level too. So you all are in Idaho. I'm in Arizona. Arizona's more of a battleground. You all are more of a deep red state, although there's probably a lot of some battleground aspects for you all too.
For sure.
But your voice carries greater weight on the state and local level. If we change the culture there, I think that will have it could have a ripple effect, because right now the federal government, there's not much you can do unless you're a major influencer. If you're a major influencer, if you have if you're able to reach millions of people, like a Tucker Carlson or somebody like that, okay, you can help change maybe the culture federally. For us, we need to stick local.
Yeah, that's
great.
That's one thing that we have kind of latched onto here, is just trying to really focus on getting information to our local community, our little area of people that we have here, so that a lot of the people who are coming here from California to flee liberal agendas, they're looking for a place with deep conservative values that value
education,
conservative economic policies and conservative education policies, and a lot of those types of things. And so, when we get a chance to encourage people to be involved locally, we definitely try to get people to do that. But it's hard, man. People are really disillusioned with the whole process. It's sad because Americans just seem to, particularly after COVID, they just seem beat down a little. Trying to interject some optimism in their minds so that they are apt to want to try and initiate change is something that's really hard to do right now.
And thank you for your answer, because that's we're a local program, local people, and we have been saying that for years now to get involved, and so to hear it coming from someplace else is great.
And you're just mirroring a lot of what we've heard from our state representatives and our local representatives. They're of the same mindset that there's not really a whole lot we can do federally. It's a little out of control with lobbyists and with corporations and the way that the parties manage the ability to be able to bring policy to the table. It's just a quagmire over there. I think that's one thing that Trump did have right is it is a swamp over there. That's for sure.
No doubt.
Yeah. And
it's I don't even know how you begin. I mean, get involved local. Also, young people get married and have kids.
Yeah.
Okay. I mean, like, you really got to do that. And because that having family, I got married a little late. I was 33 when I got married. My wife and I have been married 6.5 years. We have 4 children. I'll tell you that changes your whole perspective.
Yeah.
In a really radical way. And it gives you hope for the, I do, there are times where I look at my kids, I'm like, man, what kind of world are they going to inherit? But at the same time, I know that, God's in command, God is sovereign. And I look at these kids and, I'm like, man, I'm so glad that, you become part of something greater.
Right.
I think our culture today wants everyone to be, atomized individuals. We're all isolated, and I like individualism. I like individual rights, but it needs to be balanced with community and church and family. And it's not a coincidence that if you look at Marx, if you look at some of the big left-wing thinkers in the 20th century, church and family were the 2 institutions that they went after the hardest.
Yeah.
Okay. Why? Well, because church and family are the 2 rival institutions to the state.
Yep.
Okay. Because where does your loyalty lie? Okay. Well, for us, Christ is Lord. All right. And that's our number one loyalty. So religion, Christianity, and then locally with our church government is entirely separate. It's a distinct form of government from any other form of government. And then you have another rival form of government, family government, okay, where a father and a mother and children, that's a distinct unit. Those rival the state. The state would rather have you be a atomized individual, and then you become more dependent on the one remaining institution. It's why communists they're always atheistic. They can't allow for belief in God. They can't allow for the family.
Right. Which is why the church was enshrined in our Constitution, which is really what the separation clause is really all about. It's the enshrining of the importance of the church in America as opposed to the limiting of the church in America, which is a lot the way that people take it. But it was to ensure that the government did not tamper with the moral aspects of the community.
100%.
Yeah. So moving on, we had there was something that I wanted to talk about because he had mentioned the modern monetary theory, but also something that is coming up right now that is a massive deal is the central bank digital currency.
Yeah, I was wondering if you were going to bring that up. I think that's one of the CBDC. So for your listeners, CBDC is, a lot of people think, oh, that's another cryptocurrency. It's not. It's not cryptocurrency. You could have a debate about is Bitcoin legitimate? I thought it was a gummy bear. It sort of sounds like that, doesn't it?
Yeah. CBD what?
It's a digital dollar issued directly by the central bank. Okay. Now we have digital dollars of a sort today. Almost all transactions are on your credit card or your debit card.
Yeah.
I think actually the last I looked at it, only like 3% of transactions are in cash now, which is very, very low. Cash is a liability of the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve provides cash currency to the banks. The digital money that we use is actually a liability of private banks, of commercial entities like Citibank or Bank of America or wherever you bank. By the way, another thing that people can do, you should bank with a local or regional bank. Yeah. Get out of the big 4 or 5. Get out of there. I mean, you don't. I bank with personally. I bank with MidFirst or regional bank. I think they're great. They're regional and local banks. Take your money out of the big banks and support these local banks. We need to keep local banking alive. But I digress. Your digital money is tied to your bank account or your or PayPal or whatever. Okay. CBDC is issued directly by the Federal Reserve, and these are digital dollars. They're programmable. That's the big danger.
Yeah.
Okay. They're programmable, and they can be programmed your imagination can absolutely run wild.
Well, this is kind of where the ESG scores kind of enter into the equation, right? With the programmable dollar.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, ESG could easily play a role in that. So a programmable dollar, currently you can spend your dollar on whatever you want. Okay. Well, with cash, you can literally do anything you want. You can buy illegal items or whatever. I wouldn't recommend that on your credit card or debit card, but there's no, limitation there. The banks can't restrict what you buy per se. Yeah. They've tried to do that a little bit with guns. Was a bank that tried to, or is reporting gun sale transactions to the federal government? I can't
Can
remember
you
which
real
bank
quick?
was.
Let's just define ESG for our listeners.
Sure. ESG stands for environmental social governance, and it's a score that is calculated by these asset management companies like BlackRock, Vanguard, State Street. These are, so think of your pension fund, or if you own any mutual funds. These large, these are companies that own trillions of dollars of assets. They manage your money. Okay, that's your money, but they manage it and they invest it where they see fit. These companies like BlackRock is run by a gentleman named Larry Fink. Larry Fink is a big donor to the Democratic Party. And what these, conscious capitalists, I guess is how they would describe themselves, social justice capitalists, have done is they said, look, what we should do is promote investment in corporations that promote, the sort of social justice policies that we like. And so what they'll do, they'll send out questionnaires or surveys to these corporations and say, what percentage of your staff is, African American, or what percentage is female? What have you done to advance LGBTQ, plus whatever it is today? And they'll give out this questionnaire, and then what have you done for the climate? There's a whole lot that goes into it. And then based on the results that they get back, they give you a score. Okay. Well, if you have a low ESG score, they're not going to invest in your company.
Right.
Okay. So this is a way of cramming down the DEI agenda on corporate America, and it's been very successful.
Yeah, and a lot of people have questioned, why would organizations like, say, for instance, Disney? Disney is in the billions of dollars of losses now at this point, in the box office and in their parks and in a lot of the different places that they're promoting their products, because people are just rejecting the wholesale kind of diversity, equity, inclusion mantra that they continue to preach in most of their products now. But yet they just continue to do it. And people are just like, well, how much money are they going to lose before they get it straight? But people don't understand that they depend on these investment firms to keep running. And if their ESG score drops, it would be a lot worse than you not buying their product.
That's right. So it's either just at that just purely financial consideration, or sometimes the CEO is a true believer. I think that's probably a case with Disney.
You think
they're true
Bobby's
believers.
a true believer?
It seems so to me, but I don't know. I think one way that, going back to local and state governments, I think one way that conservative states can fight back is to put pension funds into alternative asset management investment companies, so that don't run on ESG, and that could be a way to counter this movement. But these companies like BlackRock, I mean, they have a controlling stake in almost every Fortune 500 company in America.
Yeah, they're massive.
It's wild.
Yeah.
And it's happened almost overnight. I mean, 10 years ago, this wasn't on people's radar screen.
Well, they're the biggest company that you've never heard of.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah. I think conservatives mistakenly, because we're free enterprise people. We hate socialism. Okay. So I think we mistakenly allowed our commitment to free enterprise and markets to then allow us to be to have an unquestioned loyalty to corporate America.
Yeah.
I think conservatives for too long didn't question corporate America. And now finally conservatives have woken up to it, like, wow, corporate America hates us. Like they really do. I mean, I mean, look at the Bud Light. What happened with Bud Light? I mean, who drinks Bud Light? It's rural, red state America, working class dudes. Okay. Why are they, they're promoting Dylan Mulvaney? What are they thinking? But the people who run these companies, they're not from rural red state working class America.
Well,
they're from the coast, or
a lot of these kids that are getting into these jobs all graduated from the same schools at the same time, and so they are all kind of inundated with the same kind of postmodernist philosophies. And so you're right. There is a component of it that definitely is, hey, this is our ideology. We're going to push it no matter the cost. And I think in the case of like Disney, your shareholders have just kind of gotten to the point where they're getting sick of it. But yeah, a lot of the people that are in these positions, they all are of the same ilk. They all graduated at the same time from the same schools and, same trains of thought. And so, it's going to take them forever to get out of that situation.
No, that's right. They're coming out of it, and there's the universities are a major issue. Thankfully at ASU, where I'm from, our president has made an intentional effort to support heterodox faculty. Our university president actually has been very supportive of me and my. So to give you a little bit of an update, last year we launched, my colleague and I, Donald Critchlow, who's like-minded, launched a new academic center at ASU called the Center for American Institutions, and we do a lot of events and programming, and we're planning to issue some reports coming up. But we had the full support of the university president. So been very blessed to be at a university that does that. Nevertheless, there's a whole among faculty and all these departments, including here, there's a lot of groupthink. It's very one-sided. And so students who enter into these degree programs, they're hearing one worldview, and they assume that all enlightened expert thought agrees with that view because they're not exposed to any competing ideas.
Right.
Students who take my class get a little bit of diversity of thought, which I think is beneficial to them, but that's not the case for most students, sadly.
Yeah. And
that's been for years now, decades even.
Oh yeah.
Well, we could probably talk for a little bit about that, but back on the digital currency, it seems to me like, and I could be wrong about this, so you'll be able to enlighten us a little bit on this, but it seems to me like any time that our government begins to enter into a period of recession or depression where it looks like the currency is going to fail, like say for instance like the Great Depression, there is a shift in monetary thought. Like at that time we shifted over from correct me if I'm wrong, we shifted over from the gold standard to the Federal Reserve, more or less, and now it seems like in the light of or in the possibility that we're going to enter into this, this new phase of inflation, potentially, recession, that we're looking at a new form of currency to replace what we currently have to kind of reset the clock, more or less.
You're right. So the Federal Reserve came about in 1913 after the panic of 1907. FDR during the Great Depression removed the gold redeemability for the dollar, and then Nixon in 71 completely did away with the link between the dollar and gold. I agree. I think my big concern is that whenever the next crisis comes, and they may, the Fed may be able to stave it off for a while. I mean, it's so hard to predict. But my concern is that when the next crisis comes, CBDC is going to be
the answer.
Yeah, it's going to be held out as the answer. This is what will solve the problem, especially if it's a currency crisis. Because like in 2008, yes, a financial crisis, but the dollar actually was fine through that. There were predictions of hyperinflation around 2009, 2011. That didn't happen. The price of gold did go up quite a bit, but the dollar remained fine. Just a little bit of inflation. But if the dollar got wobbly, like in a major way, okay, beyond what we saw last summer, I think inflation peaked in July last year at around 9%. If you started to get in the heavy double digits, the public, look at what the public was willing to put up with because during COVID.
Yeah.
Okay. That really alarms me that the public was that so eager and willing to put up with the most tyrannical, authoritarian, tyrannical would be our perspective.
I think you're calling a authoritarian. You're calling a spade a spade. It is what it is. Yeah.
I mean, they were shutting down. They were shutting down churches. Of course, you could go to a casino and buy marijuana if you wanted to, but don't go to church.
Yeah.
I mean, they were, but look at what the Americans put up with for a virus that killed 1% of the people who got it. Okay. And I know someone who passed away from COVID, and it was sad. But clearly, but historically speaking, we've had way worse pandemics in our history. And what the American people were willing to put up with in the name of safety. That's what really concerns me. The whole safetyism.
Yeah.
Everyone wants to be protected. And that goes back to what we were talking about atomized individualism. If you don't have family or church and all you rely upon is the state, then you are you're going to freak out when things go wrong. And so CBDC could be the answer to that, potentially.
Is there a scenario
and
under which our spiraling national debt could be a trigger for this shift?
Yeah, like included as like a solution to the national debt, like we can just pay it all off with digital currency and be done with it.
Which would be essentially a declaration of insolvency.
Right.
Well, that would be the honest thing, I guess, huh?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, like our national debt's absolutely out of control. I mean, again, $33 trillion almost. I mean,
that's an unfathomable number. I mean, it's hard to wrap your head around that number, actually.
I remember going back
it's
just
insane.
A few presidents, and our debt was like in the single trillions. And thinking then, wow, this is a mountain. Now I can't even imagine it.
It's unsurmountable. There's no way that we could ever pay off that debt. It's just not. I don't see it as being possible, not even a little bit.
And interest payments, okay? Interest payments on the debt are going up. So this Congressional Budget Office, the CBO, projected last month that the federal government this year alone will spend $663 billion just on interest on the debt, which represents over 10. I think it's like 10 or 12% of the federal budget just going to interest. That number is going to go up. I mean, interest payments on a debt are within 2 or 3 years may surpass defense spending, as interest rates rise. As the sheer amount of our debt rises, it's going to take up a bigger portion of our budget. And then you consider Medicare, Medicaid, Social Security, an aging population because our birth rate is under replacement levels. Yeah. To have a replacement birth rate is 2.1, 2,100 births per 1,000 women. We're at like 1,600 births.
I was watching Elon Musk did a interview, and he was talking about how we are entering into a population collapse globally. There's just people just aren't having children, and at some point there's going to be a point where we are not able to maintain our economies and production and everything else that we have going on with the amount of people that we have. Everything will deflate.
Mm-hmm. No, that's right. And, and then you hear some people are like, well, this is why we need, open border immigration. But, then what happened? Oh, boy. Then what happened? Then you no longer really have a country. Then, I mean, no, the answer is that the people, Americans need to have more children again. And they're being discouraged by the culture from having children. One interesting thing, though, I think that we'll see in the next 20 years, who's having kids right now? Conservative Christians. I think it's going to be really interesting to see, 15, 20 years from now. I think after Gen Z, it will be Generation A, Gen A. We'll just start at the beginning. I think the next generation of young adults in 20 years, I think, are going to be a lot more Christian. Many of them are going to be homeschooled. Okay, we're homeschooling our kids.
Yeah.
Okay, a lot of Christian parents are sending their children to homeschool, are doing homeschool or private schooling. Okay, that's so there is some reason for hope too. Okay,
yeah.
But
hey, I'm gonna go back to the debt again. Who do we owe that to?
That's a good question.
Yeah, it's so about a quarter of it is owned by foreigners.
Right.
Not good. Okay, so the Chinese make up a large part of that, but not just Chinese. Europeans. You name it.
Isn't Japan also one of our largest creditors?
Japan.
That surprised me when I came across that. I think we actually owe Japan more debt than we do China at this point, but the gap is closing. Or passing.
Yeah, I think you're correct. I think we do owe more to Japanese Japanese creditors. I remember saying that as well. Well, because treasuries are seen as a fairly stable investment if you want to park your money somewhere. Mm-hmm. How long that will last remains to be seen. By the way, if confidence began to shake in U.S. treasuries, the treasury yield is going to have to go way up, which is going to make interest payments really go through the roof, because there will be fewer buyers of our debt. Mm-hmm. If that were to happen, and that very well could happen, if confidence in the U.S. government's ability to finance its own government and to pay its debt. So about a quarter is owned by foreigners, and then the other 3/4 are owned by either domestic bondholders or by the Federal Reserve. The Federal Reserve has monetized some of this debt. So when COVID broke out and you had the huge increase in spending, the Federal Reserve purchased those treasuries. Several $1 million worth of treasuries primarily, and so the Fed owns quite a lot of this debt too. The rest, I can't recall the exact percentage. So the remaining 3/4 is owned domestically. Now, when the Fed purchases U.S. debt, they refund the interest. So there's a misconception out there that the federal government is paying interest to the Federal Reserve. That's not true. The Federal Reserve doesn't collect interest payments they refund that back to the Treasury.
Yeah, because there's no way we could afford the interest on the entire amount of the debt.
Yeah. So,
is there a danger there?
Yeah, that's what my next question was.
There's a fraction of that's owned by private investment, right? So again, we're talking about the BlackRocks and the Vanguards, are we not?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
There are a lot of Americans who will.
A lot of Americans own bonds and things like that. Yeah.
Is there any safeguards against, let's say, China calling in our debt? And what would the impact be if they did?
No, China could do that at any moment. So what China could do, there's two options. You can either wait till maturity, till the bond matures, or you could sell it before it matures on the secondary market. Now, if China, let's say China decided to just en masse, sell off their holdings of U.S. debt, what that would do, it would flood the secondary markets with U.S. treasuries. And that would just cause
chaos.
Yeah. I think your question illuminates the way that a lot of people think that U.S. debt is. They think the U.S. debt as being kind of like their debt or their mortgage payment, but that's not what it is. The debt that we have are treasury securities that we've sold. Correct? It's not like we've signed a debt a loan agreement with a country. That's not the way that it works.
No, yeah. So if I may just go back to the hypothetical of China, the thing that would prevent the Chinese from doing that. So it's why wouldn't the Chinese do that if they want to, cause havoc in the U.S.? Well, if the Chinese were to start doing that, they would have great difficulty even selling their treasuries and actually, the
who
value.
Would they sell it to?
On the secondary market. So whoever was willing to buy it, foreign buyers or domestic American buyers, but they would have a very difficult time selling it. So they'd have to take a huge, haircut discount they would only be able to sell it at a large discount. So there's an incentive actually for the Chinese not to sell their debt.
Just continue to collect the interest. To just continue to collect the interest on that debt?
Well, until the note matures.
Right.
Yeah, because the interest that you're paying is actually the maturing of the treasury notes, right? So it's not like an interest payment that you're making to a bank. It's this is how much these notes have matured, so we have to pay this into them to back their value, basically.
Yeah. And so, over the 10-year note right now is at 4%. The yield is 4%. So if you buy a 10-year note, you can make a dividend of, 4% a year on that. the price of a 10-year treasury just a year and a half ago was 1.5%. Okay. Wow. Actually, this is what, I mean, that's a huge difference. One of the reasons why Silicon Valley Bank went under, there was a run on the bank as people realized that they weren't managing their assets adequately. And so Silicon Valley Bank had to sell off its assets very quickly to have liquid cash. Okay, they needed liquidity. So, but what their assets were mostly these treasuries, primarily treasuries that they had purchased at very low yields. Okay, like, I mean, actually the lowest point was under 1% on a 10-year note. Now it's 4%. Well, if you try to sell on the secondary market before maturity, a 10-year note where the yield is only 1%, and you're a potential buyer, and you have a choice, you could buy a 10-year note at the current yield, 4%, or you could buy this one that has a yield of 1%. You will only buy the latter note at a major discount.
Right.
Why would you buy it? Because it doesn't, the yield's lower. So you would only buy it at a very low discount. So Silicon Valley Bank had accepted huge losses once they started to unload their bond holdings, and that's what did them under. Mm-hmm. Wow. So a lot of these banks are in a very fragile situation.
Kind of seat of your pants kind of bank management, seems like.
Well, this is what happens during panics throughout history. I mean, it happened, in the 19th century as well. Once panic sets in, the banks have to sell off their assets very quickly. Well, what happens? Supply and demand. If you have all of a sudden you have this huge supply of assets on the market that are being sold, but few buyers because everyone's in panic mode and they're not buying.
Could you imagine a scenario where you had a bank that needed to sell their assets for liquid cash to cover their
debt,
their people, and the only liquid cash that they could get would be digital currency that was programmable by the federal government? Could you imagine that scenario? I mean, they could literally tell you that, or they could literally program your money so that you could not use it for the purpose that you needed to use it for.
Yeah, no, yeah. I mean,
that's a terrifying thought.
Oh yeah, I mean, everything about CBDC is terrifying. It's just,
wow.
It is the ultimate control mechanism. It's actually every tyrant's dream. Yeah. It's to be able to control exactly how you spend money. Let me give you just one example. Like, let's say that, Klaus Schwab says we should all start eating bugs, and you're eating too much meat. Okay, you have a meat ration. All right, you have your CBDC, which, by the way, is tied to your identity. Like, this has already been hashed out that this is not anonymous like cash. It would be tied to your personal identity. If you reach your meat ration limit for that week, now you are unable to go to your local grocery store and buy meat. Okay. Or let's say there's another pandemic and you don't want to get their so-called vaccine. All right. Now you're part of the unvaccinated. Yeah. We'll freeze your CBDC, and like that they could deactivate your access to your own money. Look at what happened in Canada during the trucker protest.
Yeah,
they did that. They froze the bank accounts of the leaders of the trucker protest. Okay, yeah. and the one country that's actually gone forward with CBDC is, go figure, China. Of course, they have their digital.
It was easy
their digital
for them.
yuan.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, there's no problem at all. And so they have their digital yuan. Russia last week announced that they were going forward with the CBDC. India is supposed to adopt a digital rupee later this year. Europe is looking into it, so watch for the euro. And so as one after another, these various countries adopt it, there's going to be a lot of pressure from, your typical mainstream economists for the United States to follow suit.
Definitely one step closer to a global economy.
Yep.
That's what it is.
Yeah. So, we'll just have to see. So there's like a short term and a long term. In a short term, I mean, inflation's cooled off. The Fed is, now saying instead of a recession coming, it's going to be a slowdown. Unemployment's projected to go up a little bit next year. It'll be interesting to see if that has an impact on the 2024 race at all. So the short term, everyone's, sort of the narrative is being set that, Jerome Powell, who's the chair of the Federal Reserve, saved the day. I would counter that by saying, well, he started the problem. It's sort of like, patting the back of an arsonist for putting out the fire. So short term, I'm not convinced that a recession has been avoided by any stretch of the imagination. I think eventually something's going to pop here. It's just a matter of when, and those things are notoriously difficult to predict. Long term, we're facing a really, really big problem. I mean, I don't know how you can conclude otherwise. And, it got kind of the circle back to what we were talking about before. I think what you do, you go local. I mean, I think Americans should start, get back to buying their food locally, maybe growing food locally. If CBDC ever does come about, that's going to make you're going to want those connections all the more to barter or to use alternative trade items, or crypto,
and a means to be able to actually have some currency to use. Do you think that there will be people that will move to a more of a precious metals kind of currency in that event and in local economies?
Yeah, gold has always had value since the beginning of time. It's going to have value, until the end of the world. I mean, that gold is and actually, what's interesting, the BRICS countries, which for those who don't know, that it's an acronym for Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa. They're meeting in South Africa next month, and one of the items on the agenda is a BRICS currency that will be backed by gold, a gold-backed rival to the U.S. dollar as a reserve currency. Central banks in the last 10, 15 years have been net buyers of gold. In fact, I think last year, the central banks worldwide bought more gold than at any time since the late 1960s. So gold is always going to have value. It's and in a moment of currency crisis, or mass adoption of CBDC, people are going to want some sort of alternative. Gold makes sense. Okay. You could barter anything. You could barter eggs or carrots or, but it's very difficult to barter perishable goods or to barter goods that have only a limited demand. The reason why gold and silver emerged as money historically was because they have money-friendly properties. They're durable. They have a pretty small size for their high value, and they've stood the test of time. And so I think in any uncertain economy going forward, gold's going to be and silver for that matter will be items that people will flock to.
Is there? It seems interesting to me that the CBDC countries, I think everybody you mentioned in the BRIC countries, they're moving towards CBDC, but they're also getting together and going to a gold standard. What's the story?
Yeah, so
Plan A and Plan B.
Well, the CBDC would be for their domestic users, and then for cross-border. potentially cross-border payments. This came out, I think, a few weeks ago that this item was going to be on the agenda. They're just in mere talks right now. But from what I understand, this would be a rival for the dollar on an international basis.
Oh, okay.
Like a currency that Saudi Arabia, for example, could opt for instead of the dollar. It's interesting. Relations between the United States and Saudi Arabia have been strained over the last several years under the Biden administration, which is interesting because Saudi Arabia was in large part responsible for saving the dollar after Nixon removed it from the gold standard. The Saudi priced all their oil in dollars. Kissinger negotiated that. But so I think what's being spoken of here is more of an international system. But, it is possible that the Chinese could decide, or anyone else, that they want to have some sort of gold backing to their currencies. Now, that doesn't mean they'll be using gold coins. Okay. Mm-hmm. Not talking about that, but that there will be it will be linked to it in some manner, pegged to it in some manner. That's a strong possibility.
Yeah. Yeah.
Especially as fiat currencies go, and fiat currency is basically a currency that's backed by nothing. If fiat currencies go by the wayside, well, you can see a resurgence again in gold-backed currencies.
Yeah.
Just out of curiosity, why did diamonds never become a thing? Seems like they have better properties than even gold.
That's a massive conversation. Because
actually, it's an easy one. You can't diamonds are, with gold you can melt gold down and make them into coins, and you can take very large bars or nuggets of gold and divide them up into smaller ones, or you can take smaller pieces and fuse them into very large ones. Diamonds you don't have that ability. You can't stamp a diamond or so.
And also diamonds really only have value because the retail industry created value for diamonds.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean
they are beautiful to look at.
Yeah, they're pretty. You can have a piece of glass as pretty as a diamond, but I mean it really was the retail industry that pushed or drove the value of diamonds as high as it got, because they wanted to sell jewelry, and so I saw an interesting documentary on that not too long ago about how a lot of these diamond brokers ended up pushing that retail market and drove the price of that so high. But
yeah. That's
like you said,
it's just old-fashioned advertising.
It's definitely not practical. I mean, it's
they're not very
visible. Yeah, no, for sure. But do you think that people really need to start thinking about that? As private individuals, really start investing in some things that that you can hold on to in case of a collapse or
if you have the ability to save, and unfortunately, I mean, Americans right now have very little disposable income. I mean, personal savings are way down. A lot of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. If you have the ability to save, I think it's smart to save in hard assets. Gold is good. Silver is good. I think I've said before, firearms I think are really a very good hard asset investment that you could.
That's an interesting statement.
Firearms, bullets. Yeah. Bullets would be something that.
No, I mean those are. Those are not losing value. They're not, and so that's something that you can do. But the classic one's gold. I think but you don't want to do. You don't want to put all your eggs in one basket.
Yeah, you want to diversify.
Diversify, because you can have different price movements that are owing to weird variables. Let's say all of a sudden this giant gold mine was discovered in some random place in Alaska or something, and just massive amounts of gold started flooding the market. Well, the price of your gold's going to go down. So you just want to guard against things like that, shocks like that.
Yeah. So obviously there's a lot of things to think about as far as the future is concerned. But from what I'm hearing, some of the best things to think about are think locally. get into a community of people, and invest in your community, and invest in things that will guard you against inflation.
Yep. And get out of credit card debt. It really, it's a huge problem right now. I mean, credit card debt right now is like $1 trillion, close to $1 trillion, I think, nationwide. And as interest rates continue to climb, those are variable interest rates.
Yeah.
Those are adjustable rates. And so as long as I have credit cards, but I try to pay the balance every bill, that's fine. But I mean, if you're racking up a lot of debt on that and you're paying that interest, I mean, those rates are only going up. So, you just got to be as wise and prudent as you can with your own situation and get involved. Yeah. Get involved locally, get involved in your church. That's the deal.
Yeah, for sure. All right. Let's go back up here. Chris just stepped out for a second. So these figures that I found up under the Congressional Budget Office's projections concerning the gross federal debt were just kind of mind-blowing. So under Biden's current fiscal year 23 budget, the way that we're going, the gross federal debt would increase from $31 trillion today, which is 123% of our GDP. This is kind of where you measure where the danger zone is, right, is as a percentage of GDP. And this has been borne out with other countries who have exceeded this amount. And I think Japan is one of those who has an enormous percentage of GDP into their federal debt. Our debt is projected to go from $31 trillion today to $52 trillion in 2023, 10 years. So that's up to 132% of GDP. And that's really pushing the red line, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, our debt to GDP ratio in the 2000s was 60%.
Yeah. And that's
and that
really
was considered
healthy.
high, actually.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that was actually considered high back then, because generally, I think historically, like in the 80s and maybe the 90s, it was hovered around like 35-40%.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah,
the bar has been lowered or raised depending on how you want to look at it, right?
Oh yeah, it has. And it's and these projections, obviously, like who knows, like in 10 years, but on our current track, $52 trillion. You're like, well, it sure looks like at the rate we're going right now, we could reach that number within 4 or 5 years. I mean, the way things are going, it just, because keep in mind too, as the dollar loses value, the federal government needs to spend more money to cover the same amount of goods or services that it had before. And so it just keeps going up nominally.
Yeah. And then they project this out another 20 years to 2053. So this is our children and grandchildren's world, that will be up to $154 trillion, equivalent to more than $1 million per household and 4 times the median household net worth. Now, if that doesn't spell an economic collapse or disaster, I don't know what does. Yeah. It's just not sustainable.
It's all projected, of course.
Yeah, they're projections, and of course, there's an infinite number of factors and parameters that all feed into that, and world events and political changes and cultural changes. Yep. But it just isn't a good picture.
Yeah, it's who knows? And we have AI coming around the corner too, but I'm not an expert in that, other than they tell us it's going to have a big impact on the economy.
That's an interesting question, as to whether an AI could find a solution for us,
to
a
this
plan or a projection.
Well,
that's really scary.
Well, all right, or it could be the downfall.
What's interesting about AI is it's already having a massive impact on certain aspects of our economy, aspects that you wouldn't think are actually a thing. But I watched this guy he used to be a video game platformer. He has a show called The Quartering. I don't know if you're familiar with him or not, but he was talking about how AI has entered into the Instagram arena, creating realistic AI models that are pushing out the actual human female models that are using Instagram as a monetary platform. That's bonkers, isn't it?
I'm still trying to crunch it in my mind. What are you saying?
They're trying to shape the American female ideal.
Yep.
Right?
Pictures,
a la Barbie.
Yeah.
Literally,
so
physically, emotionally,
in
spiritually.
Fact, there was one, and I can't remember the name that he utilized, but there was one that people were talking to as if she was real, sending her DMs, all this other kind of stuff, and it turns out that the company came out and said that she was AI. She's not even a real person, and she has that, and she has an OnlyFans account, and
oh Lord,
it's really kind of crazy.
I can't help. There were some movies in the 70s, Colossus, THX 1138, I think it was, that was like, wow, that was a good movie, wasn't it? When you leave the theater, but it was impossible. And now it's reality.
No, I think
it's scary.
You're less than a decade away from AI being a serious presence in our society in a very real way, and it's already communicating with people as if it is a person, and that's a scary thought.
Well, and think of the pornography epidemic in our country. You think it's bad now? Add AI and virtual reality and all that into the mix.
You create your own pornography.
It tailored exactly how you want and make it very, very realistic.
Wow.
I just
don't get married. Don't get married.
I just had
no need.
I just had a really weird thought though. Like, what if that creates a more ethically based pornography industry? Like, what if you have less human trafficking because it's all computer generated?
Chris,
I'm just saying. I mean,
it's the human race. Come on.
They'll find a way. Yeah, that's true. That's true.
Seems to me like that would just kind of naturally progress into more superheroes. We'd be right back where we started.
Yeah. Who knows?
Superheroes of the porn industry.
How would an AI even help us to work in an economy? I mean, would we ask it questions about how we could better build our economy, or like?
Well, there's so many unknowns. One, probably the greatest casualty will be, ironically, white collar work. So everyone was, everyone thought, we saw the death of blue collar labor, and actually the fact of the matter is that the jobs that are most threatened by AI are, low level law clerks and computer programmers, and
screenwriters.
Well,
that's right.
That's what they're protesting about for the most part, is they want rules against AI writing. And the truth of it is that if AI does get to the point where it can do scripts, I mean, why pay a script writer?
It's going to go all the way up to the top.
Yeah, take a step from there, from screenwriters to speech writing. Wait till somebody stands up an AI president candidate.
Wow. That's terrifying.
That is terrifying.
He's not actually there. He's more like Max Headroom. He's just like on your TV.
Yeah.
Kamala Harris.
And it wouldn't have to be hidden. It wouldn't even have to be hidden because everybody before, it's AI, so it's got to be better than fallible humans.
Yeah, for sure. What were you saying, Jonathan?
I heard, I can't remember where I heard this, but someone noted recently that Kamala Harris sometimes sounds like a chat GPT program gone wrong or something.
Her laugh certainly doesn't seem human, that's for sure.
But so actually what jobs are looking good in this era are skilled trades. I mean, like actually, like this week we've got some plumbing issues. Our house is settling a bit, and so we think there might be something with the drain pipe. I mean, I'm sorry, AI isn't gonna.
It's not gonna come snake your toilet. That's for sure.
Hey, Jonathan, our house flooded on December 25th of last year. The contractor is there today.
And
it's taken that long to find somebody with the skills to fix the physical problems that are going on with
Is your
house.
contractor an AI?
I don't know.
Well, if AI does enter the trades at all, it won't be to replace the actual, plumber or electrician. Right. It might be to
do the estimate,
be like an aid, to provide information. But you're still going to need that skilled tradesman.
You're going to need that guy with the hands to swing the hammer.
Here's a thought: when we have a problem, whether it's our car or house, electrical, whatever, we go to Google. And we say, how do we do this? So is Google going to be the avenue to get to that AI? Or how's that going to come to us?
Well, Microsoft's already doing it.
Yeah, but there will always be specialties by which you are not capable of doing it on your own. The normal average person.
In the physical world.
Going to Google and learning how to frame up a roof is not the same as actually framing up the roof. There's skill involved in that, and so I agree with you, Jonathan. I think that we're going to see a renaissance of trade workers over the next decade, 20 years, where we're going to go back to kind of our blue collar roots, as it were.
And Jim Dobson said that 40 years ago. Not all your kids have to go to college. There will always be a need for ditch diggers. Is how he put that. It's like. Yeah.
There's dignity in that work. I think that was one of the great lies of the last several decades is that, you didn't go to college, like as if like that made you, some like, idiot or like why wouldn't you take out thousands and thousands of dollars of debt and, and then when in reality, actually, I think the truth of the matter, it depends on your degree. I mean, obviously, like certain fields like physicians, lawyers, you need that higher education. But, if we do move, and it appears that we are moving toward more skilled trades, that the model for that is apprenticeships.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay. Yeah. Not the classroom in a university somewhere.
So are you saying there's not going to be a whole lot of room for degrees in like lesbian dance theory then?
Probably not. I wouldn't if I wouldn't have any of my daughters major in that.
Oh man, Jonathan. Well, before we get out of here, Greg, do you have any final words?
Oh, you always sneak up on me with that. I did have something. Go to Ken. See if I can pull that back out.
Ken, you got any final words for us?
Well, my final words would just be, you've heard it here today. The best thing that you can do is invest in your local community to secure yourself. And for sure, the future is going to be very different. Things are changing, and they're rapidly accelerating in the wrong directions. We know things aren't going to just veer into utopia all by themselves. So my advice is to get your house in order to weather whatever is coming. It's not going to be easy. And if you don't have your house financially in order, it's going to be a whole lot harder on you. Your options go down, your avenues go down, and your resources all go down. And so get your house in order financially. Here at Athol Baptist Church, we're going to be offering a financial stewardship class coming up here in about another month to help teach you the biblical principles behind finances. And we just invite you to join in on that. There are similar programs in other churches and available online and elsewhere, but if you don't have your finances in order to where you have as much financial freedom as you can at this stage in your life, then you're just going to be much more vulnerable to whatever comes down the history pipe to us.
Yeah.
So
earlier in the interview, you had said something that kind of made me go, And you were saying, who's having kids? And you alluded to the fact that it was Christians, conservatives. And so maybe the next generation will be influenced by that as opposed to what we're seeing in our colleges and in our world today. And is that I've read the end of the book, and it's not supposed to get better. Do you think there'll be a resurgence of the Christian faith or conservatism in America / in the world?
I think absolutely that's a strong possibility. The Lord will always have his remnant. Mm-hmm. I think we're already seeing it now. But it's just the beginning. I think we're more and more going to see the society and culture bifurcate. And you're going to be able, in 20 years, you're going to know almost. Hope not. Within 20 years, you're gonna be able to look at a young person and be able to tell within 30 seconds if that person grew up in a home where that kid was glued to a smartphone at age 2 and never read a verse of scripture in his life, and what was fed through the public school system and indoctrinated in all the cultural ways, versus a kid who grew up in a Christian home, went to a solid private school or was homeschooled, went to church, grew up in a family with a mother and a father and siblings. It's going to be so clear that it'll be a world of difference between those two. So we're going to see the society and the culture more and more begin to, you're seeing it already. I think this is one reason why red states are becoming more red and blue states are becoming more blue, which we're talking about this before we began, but I think that's really the only way to keep the union of the United States together, is for there to be some agreement that blue states can govern the way they wish and red states can govern the way they wish, and we'll have like a common defense or something. Mm-hmm. I'm not sure that that's doable, but because we're seeing more and more society break up. And if you've ever read Brave New World, like Aldous Huxley, if you haven't read it, you need to read it.
Yeah, it's a great book.
Published in 1932. It's crazy because you're like, wow, how did he know all this?
Yeah. Him and Orwell, a lot of these guys kind of really hit the nail right on the head.
Yep. But in Brave New World, there are these communities, they're called the Savages, and they are humans who didn't buy into the matrix. Humans that didn't, accept wholesale the entire, new way of doing things, and they live like authentic human beings. I'm thinking similarly on lines like that, where children who don't grow up in the culture we're describing are going to be very, very different, and they'll probably be seen by the other kids as weird or strange or something, but in reality they'll be authentically human, and that's what will make them so strange.
Yeah.
So Brandon, you and your fiance, how many are you planning? 4, 5, 6 kids?
Last I heard it was 12. 30.
Whoa.
Wow.
Some adoption going on here, brother.
30 and a half. Wow.
0.5.
That's impressive. That's impressive. Well, Jonathan, thanks for joining us, man. Do you have any final words for us?
No, have hope, because it can be really easy to get consumed by all the negativity. Now, that doesn't mean be naive. You don't want to be naive. You don't want to have your head in the sand. You don't want to be apathetic. Okay. Right. It's not wrong to be aware. You want to be aware of what's going on around you. At the same time, you need to have a proper biblical perspective. God's in control. One of my favorite Psalms is Psalm chapter 2. And look, there's a lot of wickedness today. That shouldn't surprise us. Okay. And so we need to just stick together, do our best. And, with what with our lot, the Lord has given us, different abilities and different, avenues, and you glorify the Lord in everything that you do. And, you do that and you live a hope-filled life, and you'll be okay. If things go to hell in a handbasket, you'll be all right. Be
an ambassador of Christ. That job will not change no matter what happens in the world.
Amen.
Yeah. Well, I'd take it a step farther just before we close. Obviously, you want to approach life with a fair bit of optimism. You want to hedge your bets and be protected against the possibility of it getting worse. And make sure that your house is in order, and make sure that you're investing in things that will last past a digital currency. And then also, I would encourage you to talk with your churches, because I think that Christian churches could take a couple of lessons from the Mormon Church and its ability to be prepared. In the event that we do enter into a crisis, if your church is in a lot of debt and has no assets outside of the bank, they're going to be hard pressed to carry out the mission that God's given them. And so I would encourage you to talk to your church leaders, talk to your pastors, and encourage them to not be afraid to diversify some of God's assets, and have available to you the ability to help people no matter what happens. And think about those things and pray about them, because ultimately, if everything collapses, our job doesn't change. We're still people of the kingdom. We still are to proliferate the gospel. We're still to take care of those that are impoverished. These are things that we do. And so, I'd encourage you to think about that. But again, Jonathan, man, thank you so much for joining us again. We really appreciate it.
Same. Enjoyed the conversation.
Thank you. Well, that about does it for us today. As always, thank you for joining us. If you have a comment or a question or an idea for an episode, send us an email to 3p@ethelbaptistchurch.org so that Ken can answer it. If you enjoyed this episode, please give it a like, share it with your friends, and subscribe so you don't miss any future episodes. That really helps us out, guys. So if you don't mind sharing these when you get them to your friends and some of the groups that you belong to, we'd really appreciate it. Thanks to Ethel Baptist Church and its members for the generous support of this ministry. And again, thank you for listening. And until next time, remember the Great Commission. Go into all the world, reach the lost with the gospel, and build disciples who can do the same. And with that, we are out.